Divine Wonders. Miracles, Bible stories that transformed lives. Hannah's prayer for a son, 1 Samuel 1:9-20. Hannah was deeply troubled. Her heart ached as she endured ridicule from Peninnah, her husband's other wife, who mocked her barrenness year after year. During one annual trip to the temple, Hannah reached her breaking point. With tears streaming down her face, she entered the temple and knelt before the Lord. Her prayer was raw and unfiltered. She promised that if God would grant her a son, she would dedicate him to the Lord for all his days. As she prayed silently, her lips moved, but no words came out. Eli, the priest, observed her and misunderstood, assuming she was drunk. Confronting her, he rebuked her behavior, but Hannah explained her anguish and the depths of her sorrow. Eli, moved by her sincerity, blessed her, saying, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." Hannah left the temple with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Not long after, God answered her heartfelt prayer, and she conceived a son, Samuel. True to her promise, Hannah dedicated Samuel to the Lord, and he grew to become one of Israel's greatest prophets. Prayer, when offered with a sincere heart, can lead to blessings and miracles beyond our imagination. Elijah and the prophets of Baal, 1 Kings 18:16-39. In a land gripped by drought and spiritual decay, the prophet Elijah challenged the people of Israel to make a choice: follow the true God or continue worshipping Baal. On Mount Carmel, Elijah proposed a dramatic test to prove God's power. 2 altars were prepared, one for Baal's prophets and one for the Lord. The challenge? Each side would call on their deity to ignite the offering with fire. From morning until evening, the prophets of Baal shouted, danced, and even cut themselves, begging their God to send fire. But no fire came. The scene grew tense as Elijah mocked them, suggesting Baal might be asleep or busy elsewhere. Finally, Elijah stepped forward. He repaired the altar of the Lord, drenched it in water to eliminate any doubt, and offered a simple yet powerful prayer. "Lord, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant." Immediately, fire fell from heaven, consuming not only the sacrifice but also the stones and water surrounding it. The people fell to their knees, proclaiming, "The Lord, He is God." This moment restored their faith and brought them back to worship the true God. God hears and responds to prayers that glorify Him and reveal His truth. Hezekiah's prayer for healing, 2 Kings 21-7. King Hezekiah, a faithful leader who had sought to restore Israel's devotion to God, faced a dire proclamation from the prophet Isaiah: "Put your house in order, for you are going to die." The news struck Hezekiah like a thunderbolt. In desperation, he turned his face to the wall, wept bitterly, and prayed with all his heart. "Remember, Lord," he pleaded, "how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion." His prayer was not a demand, but a heartfelt cry for mercy. Before Isaiah could leave the palace, God gave him a new message. Hezekiah's prayer had been heard, and his life would be extended by 15 years. As a sign of this promise, God made the shadow on a sundial move backward, an extraordinary event. Hezekiah recovered fully and used his remaining years to glorify God. His story became a testament to the compassion and faithfulness of God, who answers prayers for healing and deliverance. God is compassionate and merciful, responding to heartfelt prayers in ways that display His power and grace. Daniel in the lion's den, Daniel 6:10-23. Daniel was a man of unwavering faith, even in a foreign land where worship of the God of Israel was forbidden. When a decree was issued that no one could pray to any god or man except the king for 30 days, Daniel chose to remain faithful. He knelt by his window, as was his custom, and prayed openly to God 3 times a day. His enemies, jealous of his favor with the king, saw this as an opportunity to accuse him. King Darius, though fond of Daniel, was bound by the law and had no choice but to order Daniel's punishment, being thrown into the lion's den. That night the king could not sleep, tormented by the thought of Daniel's fate. At dawn he rushed to the den and called out, "Daniel, Has your God been able to rescue you?" To his relief, Daniel replied that God had sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions. Daniel emerged unscathed, proving that God protects those who remain faithful to him. The king issued a new decree, declaring the power and sovereignty of Daniel's God. God honors the prayers of those who remain faithful, even in the face of persecution. Peter's release from prison, Acts 12:1-17. Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples, was imprisoned by King Herod, who sought to suppress the growing Christian movement. Herod had already executed James, the brother of John, and his actions pleased many of the Jewish leaders. Encouraged by this, Herod arrested Peter, intending to publicly try and execute him after the Passover festival. Bound with 2 chains and guarded by 4 squads of soldiers, Peter's situation seemed hopeless. The prison was fortified and escape was humanly impossible. Yet, while Peter was held captive, the early church gathered fervently to pray for him. Their prayers were unceasing, filled with faith and hope that God would intervene on Peter's behalf. On the night before his trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 guards, his hands chained, with sentries posted at the prison gate. Suddenly, a radiant light filled the cell. An angel of the Lord appeared and struck Peter on the side to wake him. "Quick, get up," the angel said, and at that moment Peter's chains fell off his wrists. The angel instructed Peter to dress himself and follow. Though dazed and thinking it was a vision, Peter obeyed. They passed the guards unnoticed, and when they reached the iron gate leading to the city, it opened by itself. Once outside, the angel left him. Realizing he was truly free, Peter exclaimed, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen." Peter made his way to the house of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many believers had gathered to pray. When he knocked at the gate, a servant named Rhoda recognized his voice and, overjoyed, ran to tell the others. They were astonished, initially doubting her, but eventually welcomed Peter with great relief and praise to God. Herod, upon discovering Peter's escape, was furious and ordered a thorough search. The guards were interrogated and executed, but the power of collective prayer had already demonstrated God's ability to deliver the faithful. This story highlights the miraculous power of unified prayer. When believers come together in faith, God responds in extraordinary ways, bringing freedom and deliverance even from the direst circumstances. Elijah prays for rain, 1 Kings 18:41-46. After 3.5 years of drought in Israel, the land was dry, the crops had failed, and the people were desperate. The drought had been sent as a judgment for Israel's idolatry under King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who led the nation into the worship of Baal. Yet God's prophet Elijah knew that the time for restoration had come. Elijah had just witnessed a great triumph over the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. In a dramatic display of God's power, fire fell from heaven, consuming Elijah's sacrifice, proving that the Lord alone is God. The people fell on their faces in repentance, crying, "The Lord, He is God." With their hearts turned back to God, Elijah prepared for the next miracle, the end of the drought. He told King Ahab, "Go eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." Yet the skies were clear and there was no sign of rain. Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, knelt on the ground, and bowed with his face between his knees in earnest prayer. He sent his servant to look toward the sea for any sign of rain. The servant returned, saying, "There is nothing there." Elijah prayed again and sent the servant back, and again there was no sign. This process repeated 7 times. Elijah's persistence demonstrated his unwavering faith in God's promise, even when there was no evidence of change. Finally, on the 7th time, the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." Elijah's faith never wavered, and he recognized this small cloud as the beginning of God's provision. He instructed Ahab to prepare his chariot and head back to Jezreel before the heavy rain would make travel impossible. The sky grew dark with clouds. The wind rose, and a torrential rain began to fall, ending the drought and bringing life back to the land. In a final miraculous act, the Spirit of the Lord empowered Elijah to run ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to Jezreel, a distance of approximately 20 miles. Elijah's story reminds us of the power of persistent prayer. Even when circumstances seem unchanging, faith in God's timing and promises can lead to miraculous outcomes. It is a testament to trusting God completely and praying with perseverance, knowing that He will fulfill His word. Jesus heals the bleeding woman, Mark 5:25-34. For 12 long years she had suffered. A woman, her name lost to history but her plight known to all, had endured constant bleeding, a condition that left her weak and ostracized. She had spent all her money seeking cures from physicians, but none had helped her. Instead, her condition worsened. Her life was a cycle of pain and isolation until she heard of Jesus, a healer, a man of miracles, who was passing through her town. Desperation fueled her courage as she joined the throng pressing around him. The crowd was immense, but she had a single, unshakable thought. If I just touch his cloak, I will be healed. With trembling hands, she reached out and brushed the hem of his garment. Instantly, she felt a warmth flood her body, and she knew she was healed. Jesus stopped in his tracks and turned to the crowd. "Who touched my clothes?" he asked, though he already knew. The disciples were perplexed. "You see the people crowding against you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus looked around until his eyes met hers. Knowing she could not remain hidden, she fell at his feet, trembling with fear and awe, and confessed the whole truth. "Daughter," he said, his voice filled with compassion, "your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Her heart swelled with joy as she left, not only healed physically but restored in spirit. Even the smallest act of faith can unlock God's miraculous power. He sees and honors those who seek Him with trust and humility. The raising of Lazarus, John 11:1-44. In the small town of Bethany, a tragedy unfolded. Lazarus, a beloved friend of Jesus and brother to Mary and Martha, had fallen gravely ill. His sisters sent word to Jesus, pleading for him to come quickly, but when the message reached Jesus, he responded in an unexpected way. "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Instead of rushing to Lazarus's side, Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. During this time, Lazarus succumbed to his illness, and by the time Jesus arrived, he had been in the tomb for 4 days. Martha, grieving and confused, ran out to meet him. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus assured her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha, thinking he referred to the resurrection at the last day, replied, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus declared, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she said, her faith unwavering. Mary joined them, weeping, and Jesus, deeply moved, asked to be taken to the tomb. When he arrived, he wept, a profound moment showing his compassion and love. Then, standing before the sealed tomb, Jesus commanded, "Take away the stone." Martha hesitated, "But Lord, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Jesus replied, "Did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God?" The stone was rolled away, and Jesus lifted his eyes to heaven. "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." Then, with a loud voice, he called out, "Lazarus, come out!" To everyone's astonishment, the man who had been dead walked out of the tomb, his hands and feet wrapped in grave clothes. "Take off the grave clothes and let him go," Jesus said. The miracle was undeniable, a testament to Jesus' power over life and death. It brought glory to God and solidified the faith of many who witnessed it. Even when all hope seems lost, Jesus has the power to bring life and restoration. His timing may not align with ours, but his purpose is always for God's glory and our ultimate good. Thank you for joining us on this journey through these miraculous stories of faith, hope, and God's unfailing love. Remember, miracles are not just stories of the past. They remind us of what's possible when we trust in Him. If these stories inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more uplifting content. Share this video to bring hope to others, and let's continue to grow in faith together. Until next time, stay blessed.